The Bible encourages Christians to protect our reputation. Elders are required to have a good reputation with those outside the church. We believe a good reputation is necessary to be an effective witness for Christ. One of the things that can damage our reputation today is being associated with criminals, drug dealers, or prostitutes. Therefore, Christians tend to avoid those kinds of people. However, we will see in today's passage from Luke 5 that Jesus did not live his life that way. He openly ate with people who were regarded as sinners. That should prompt us to reevaluate our attitude toward people in our society who have bad reputations. Yesterday we read in Luke 5 that Peter, James, and John left everything and began following Jesus. Then Jesus healed a leper. Next, some men brought a paralytic to be healed, but the crowd around Jesus was so large they had to go up on the roof and lower the man on a stretcher into the room in which Jesus was teaching. Jesus forgave the paralytic's sins and then healed him to prove that he had authority to forgive sins. And now let's pick up reading at Luke 5, verse 27. And after that he went out and noticed a tax collector named Levi sitting in the tax office, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he left everything behind and rose up and began to follow him. Matthew left everything behind. That was a radical transformation in Matthew's life. One minute he had an occupation as a tax collector. The next minute he had no occupation and was following an itinerant preacher, trusting that somehow he would have food, clothing, and shelter. Today, many preachers try to convert people to Christianity without requiring them to give up anything. These preachers try to win as many people to Christ as possible by making it as easy as possible. People do not necessarily have to give up their jobs in order to be saved. But if people are living a sinful lifestyle, then they certainly need to give up their sin if they want to be a Christian. Jesus has to be Lord of our life in order to be saved. If someone refuses to give up a sinful lifestyle, then they have not truly made Jesus Lord of their life. As Christians, we should not try to win as many people as possible at all costs. Instead, we should seek true converts. It takes repentance to be a true convert. Repentance means change. Verse 29. And Levi gave a big reception for him in his house, and there was a great crowd of tax collectors and other people who were reclining at the table with them. And the Pharisees and their scribes began grumbling at his disciples, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with the tax collectors and sinners?" The New Testament encourages us to guard our reputation. One of the requirements to be an elder is to have a good reputation with those outside the church. Oftentimes, our reputation is determined by the people we associate with. If it becomes known that we spend time with criminals, prostitutes, or liars, then our reputation will be damaged. Therefore, Christians tend to avoid sinful people. The Bible also teaches us that a little leaven leavens the whole lump. If we spend time with sinful people, then we will tend to become like them and imitate their sin. That would not be good. That is another reason to avoid people who live a life of sin. However, Jesus did not live his life that way. He openly ate with tax collectors and sinners. This creates a dilemma for us. Do we do what Jesus did, or do we protect our reputation? Verse 31. And Jesus answered and said to them, "It is not those who are well who need a physician, but those who are sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." As Christians, we need to demonstrate the love of Christ. We should desire to tell all people about Jesus. We are commanded to make disciples of all the nations. As Jesus said, true Christians do not need to be told about repentance. Instead, sinners need to be called to repentance. We have to associate with sinners in order to do that. Yes, we need to protect our reputation, but we also need to reach out to those who desperately need to hear the truth. Instead of avoiding those who may sully our reputation, we need to reach out in such a way that it is obvious we are extending the love of Christ and not endorsing their lifestyle. As we do that, we need to make sure we influence them towards godliness and avoid letting them influence us towards sinfulness. We need to be the influencer, not the influencee. Verse 33. And they said to Jesus, "The disciples of John often fast and offer prayers. The disciples of the Pharisees also do likewise, but yours eat and drink." The pronoun they refers to the Pharisees and their scribes. They were not successful in criticizing Jesus regarding who he ate with, so they attacked his disciples for failing to fast. We gather from this verse that the Pharisees and the disciples of John fasted often. That was not a requirement of the Mosaic law. Therefore, there was no reason for the disciples of Jesus to fast. Verse 34. And Jesus said to them, "Can you make the attendants of the bridegroom fast while the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come, and when the bridegroom is taken away from them, then they will fast in those days." And he was also telling them a parable. "No one tears a piece of cloth from a new garment and puts it on an old garment. Otherwise he will both tear the new, and the piece from the new will not match the old. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise the new wine will burst the skins, and it will be spilled out, and the skins will be ruined. But new wine must be put into fresh wineskins." Jesus did not explain his parable. Basically, he was saying the Pharisees and their scribes were the old garments in wine. Jesus was the new garments in wine. It was not correct to force the disciples of Jesus to follow the practices of the Pharisees because Jesus was bringing something new. Verse 39. And no one, after drinking old wine, wishes for new, for he says, "The old is good enough." The Pharisees thought the Mosaic law was good enough. They were not interested in Jesus. Chapter 6, verse 1. Now it happened that on a Sabbath he was passing through some grain fields, and his disciples were picking and eating the heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands. I grew up on a farm, and we used to do this. A grain field is made up of thousands of stalks of grain. At the top of each stalk is a head that contains a couple dozen kernels of grain. We used to pull the head of grain off the stalk, rub the kernels in our hands to separate the chaff from the grain, blow in our hands to blow the chaff away, and then the only thing in our hands was the kernels of grain, which we would plop into our mouth and eat as a little snack. That is what the disciples were doing. Verse 2. But some of the Pharisees said, "Why do you do what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" The law prohibited working on the Sabbath. Harvesting a field is work, but that is not what the disciples were doing. They were simply picking a few heads of grain and eating a snack. The law did not prohibit eating a snack on the Sabbath. Verse 3. And Jesus answered and said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God and took and ate the consecrated bread which is not lawful for any to eat, except the priests alone, and gave it to his companions?" I'm not sure Jesus was saying it was okay for the priests to share the consecrated bread. Instead, Jesus was trying to get the Pharisees to think about the contrast between their rigid rules and the complexities of living a life of both obedience to God and mercy to fellow humans. Verse 5. And Jesus was saying to them, "The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Ultimately, Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath and has the right to determine what is lawful and not lawful. Christians tend to avoid people with bad reputations. While it is true we need to protect our reputation, we also need to reach out to those who most need to hear the truth about Jesus. Who are the people near you who are living a sinful lifestyle and need to hear the truth about Jesus? What can you do to demonstrate and share the love of God with them without appearing to endorse their sin and thus damage your reputation? Thanks for visiting Bible Mountain. If you have already joined my email list, thank you, and please tell others about Bible Mountain. If you have not joined my email list yet, please do so now. In order to join, go to BibleMountain.com, click on subscribe, and that will take you to a page where you can sign up. Your email address will not be sold nor given away. Once again, thanks for visiting Bible Mountain.